Hello everyone, I am CA Kamlesh Malushte and I am here on behalf of the Tax Practitioners Association of Ratnagiri, which has come up with this initiative of learning when we all are stuck at home. I hope you all are being at home and you are all being safe. So I am here to discuss certain amendments which are brought into the Income Tax Act by the Finance Act 2020. As we all know, there have been many amendments which are brought by Finance Act 2020. Now amongst those amendments, there are certain amendments which were introduced in bill, and then while passing this bill as an act, they have been again amended into certain other provisions. So amongst all those amendments, I will be discussing majorly those amendments which are important from the practice which we do, and then after discussing those major amendments which are actually regularly required in our daily practice, I will be discussing the rest of the amendments which are not actually used on daily basis or not so concerning. Now out of those amendments, the major amendment which is talked a lot about is the amendment which is brought in for deciding the residential status of an individual. So section 6 Clause 1, which deals with the residential status of an individual, has been amended. Let us discuss that. We'll start with that amendment first and then we'll continue with the other amendments. So section 6 Clause 1, as we all know, lays down two basic conditions which determine the residential status of a person. The first basic condition states that if a person stays in India during the previous year for a period of 182 days or more, then he will be termed as a resident. Or the second basic condition which states that if his stay in India in total is for 60 days or more during the previous year and for 365 days or more during the 4 preceding previous years, then he will be treated as a resident in India. Right, these are the basic conditions. Now under this clause 1 of section 6, there is an explanation 1, which provides for certain exceptions wherein the second basic condition has a certain modification where you substitute the number of days of 60 into 182 days. So in short, explanation 1 provides for certain cases wherein only the first basic condition shall be applied, and if that person satisfies the first basic condition, he will be treated as resident. Now the first amendment has been done under clause B of explanation 1, which deals with cases where an individual who is either a person of Indian origin or a resident of India comes to India for a visit. Now in the original clause, the number of days of 60 was substituted by 182 days. That means only first basic condition was applicable for such kinds of persons who came to India for visit. Now under the amended clause, what they have done is they have kept the original part as it is, and then they have inserted one more condition to this clause. They say that if you are a regular person who is visiting India, then fine, instead of 60 days, 182 days shall be replaced. But if you are a person of Indian origin or if you are a citizen of India and your total income excluding income from foreign sources exceeds rupees 15 lakhs, then instead of 182 days, 60 days shall be replaced by 120 days. Okay, so what this means is, suppose there is a person who is a person of Indian origin or a resident of India and he comes to India for a visit, and if his stay in India is for more than 120 days but less than 182 days, and his total income in India excluding the income from foreign sources is exceeding 15 lakhs, then he will be treated as resident in India. Now what is to be termed as excluding income from foreign sources? So we need to understand what is this income from foreign sources. So they have given an explanation which defines income from foreign sources. So income from foreign sources is nothing but income accruing or arising outside India, except income which is accruing or arising outside India from business which is controlled in India or from profession which is set up in India. So while computing total income in India, we will include income accruing or arising outside India which is controlled from business in India or a profession which is set up in India. So that shall be excluded from foreign sources income, right? So this is the first amendment which is brought into by Finance Act 2020. Now this amendment was brought in order to deal with the mischief wherein people will kind of trying to plan out strategies by staying for a certain number of days, around 120 to 130 days into each country including India, in order to avoid taxation. So by this act amendment, what they have done is they are going to trap such strategies into this act. So this is the first amendment. The second amendment is by insertion of a new clause 1A under section 6, which deals with deemed residential status. So under clause 1A, which is introduced by Finance Act 2020, if a person who is a citizen of India having total income excluding foreign sources income, again the definition of income from foreign sources shall remain same as discussed earlier, that is income from sources, that is income arising or accruing outside India, except income which is accruing or arising from business which is controlled from India or profession which is set up in India. So if total income in India excluding foreign sources is exceeding 15 lakhs and is not taxable in any other country or territory by reason of his domicile or residence or any other criteria of similar nature, then that person shall be deemed to be a resident in India. Okay, so 1A is trying to include those kinds of persons who are enjoying the benefit of double non-taxation. That means they are not taxable for income in their countries as well as in India. So they are now included in the residential status in India. So as we all know, there is a difference between resident and ordinarily resident and resident not ordinarily resident. Now under this amendment, by including such persons into residential status as resident, they are not treating those persons as resident and ordinarily resident, but they are treating such persons as resident but not ordinarily resident. Now we all know there is a difference between, what is the difference between resident and ordinarily resident, which we call as ROR, and resident but not ordinarily resident as RNOR. For ROR, worldwide income, that is global income, is taxable, but for RNOR, income which is accruing or arising in India or which is received in India is taxable. Along with this income, income which is received outside India or accruing or arising outside India from business which is controlled from India or from a profession which is set up in India is taxable only. Other than that, any income which is accruing or arising outside India is not taxable for RNOR. Okay, so if we try and understand these amendments by an example, let us take an example for clause B under explanation 1. So suppose there is a person who is of Indian origin and who is coming to India for a visit, and his stay in India is for 130 days. Okay, so it is less than 182 days. Yes, we will check whether his income during that previous year is exceeding 15 lakhs or not. Okay, so suppose his income accruing or arising in India is rupees 12 lakhs. He is having a business in Dubai which is controlled from India. Now proceeds or income from that business from Dubai, that is from business in Dubai, is rupees 8 lakhs. Okay, so income accruing or arising in India is 12 lakhs. Income accruing or arising outside India from business in Dubai is rupees 8 lakhs, but that business is controlled from India. That means while computing income in India, we will include it in the total income. That means his total income is 12 plus 8 rupees 20 lakhs. So his income is exceeding rupees 15 lakhs. His stay is more than 120 days, that is 120 days or more, and he is a person of Indian origin. That means he will be treated as a resident in India under the amended clause B under explanation 1 of clause 1 of section 6. Okay, this is the first case. If that income from business in Dubai would have been rupees 2 lakhs, for example, suppose let us assume that income from business in Dubai is rupees 2 lakhs. His income accruing or arising in India is rupees 12 lakhs. So in total, the income would be 12 plus 2, 14 lakhs, which is not exceeding 15 lakhs. So for such person, the number of days criteria will not be 120 days or more. It will still remain to be 182 days only. Okay, I hope it is very clear. Now let us understand the second amendment, which is brought in by clause 1A under section 6. Let us take an example. Suppose there is this individual who is a citizen of India and his stay in India was just 20 days. Okay, his income accruing or arising in India is rupees 5 lakhs only. He is also having a business in Dubai, which is controlled from India. Okay, now income which is accruing or arising from that business in Dubai is rupees, say 14 lakhs. Now while computing the monetary limit given under clause 1A, we will check whether it is exceeding 15 lakhs or not. Now we all know, we have already discussed, while excluding income from foreign sources, income which is accruing or arising from business which is controlled from India or profession which is set up in India shall not be considered. That means it will be included in total income. That means the amount of rupees 14 lakhs will be included, plus the income which is accruing or arising in India of rupees 12 lakhs, it shall also be included. His income is exceeding rupees 15 lakhs. He is a person who is a citizen of India. Now there is one more additional condition to this clause 1A, that he should not be liable for taxation in any other country or territory by reason of his domicile or residence or any other criteria of similar nature. Now we all know his income is not taxable in Dubai, so he is fulfilling the corresponding additional condition also, which is provided by clause 1A. That means since his income is exceeding rupees 15 lakhs, and since he is not liable for tax in that country or any other country by reason of his residence, domicile or any other reason of similar nature, he will be deemed to be a resident in India, and then the income which is accruing or arising from business which is controlled from India shall be taxable to that person, along with the income which is accruing or arising in India. Okay. So in the first amendment, which was brought in clause B of explanation 1 of clause 1 of section 6, under that amendment, the number of days criteria was important. You were substituting 120 days instead of 60 days. But in this amendment, which is brought by clause 1A under section 6, you are deeming a person as a resident without considering his number of days stay in India. Okay, you only see 3 conditions. First one is whether he is a citizen of India or not. If he is a citizen of India. Second thing, whether his income, total income in India is exceeding 15 lakhs or not. Yes. And then third thing, whether that person is not taxable in other country by reason of his residence or domicile, etc., etc. If all the conditions are satisfied, then that person becomes resident by clause 1A of section 6. Now clause 1A of section 6 is overriding clause 1 of section 6. That is, it starts with a non-obstante clause. Notwithstanding anything contained in clause 1, you will directly be applying clause 1A, okay, which deals with deemed residential status. So I hope the amendments related to section 6 are clear, and we have already seen that when we say that person will be resident, deemed resident, or in the above case 120 days का criteria वाला resident, those persons will be resident in India, but those persons will be resident and not ordinarily residents only, but not residents and ordinary residents. So corresponding amendment has been brought in under clause 6 of section 6, which deals with non-residential status. So they have added these two criteria into section 6 clause 6. So such persons shall be resident but not ordinarily resident. In short, their income, over and above their income from India, only that income which is accruing or arising from business which is controlled from India or profession which is set up in India will only be taxable. People were afraid that whether their salary incomes or other kinds of incomes which were accruing or arising outside India, like in other countries, will be taxable or what. So no, finance minister as well as the department has already clarified that only that income which is which is accruing or arising from business which is controlled in India or profession which is set up in India will only be taxable. Of course, because when you treat a person as R and R, any income which is received outside India or accruing or arising outside India is not taxable except the conditions or those situations discussed earlier, right? So this is all about section 6 clause 1 and section 6 clause 6, which deals with residential status of an individual. Okay. Now the next set of amendments have been made under section 9. Section 9, we all know, it deals with income accruing or arising in India. Now under section 9, an amendment has been done under the provisions of business connection. A new explanation 3A has been introduced with effect from 1st April 2021, which includes certain kinds of income under activities which are carried out in India. I will read the explanation 3A and then we will discuss. Now explanation 3A is as follows. For the removal of doubts, it is hereby declared that the income attributable to the operations carried out in India as referred to in explanation 1 shall include income from 1. Such advertisement which targets a customer who resides in India or a customer who accesses the advertisement through internet protocol address located in India. 2. Sale of data collected from a person who resides in India or from a person who uses internet protocol address located in India. And sale of goods or services using data collected from a person who resides in India or from a person who uses internet protocol address located in India. Now this amendment, that is this explanation, is going to have a huge impact while computing the income taxable out of activities carried out in India for non-residents. Now by this explanation, they are expanding the scope of activities which are taxable in India. So first one deals with income which is accruing or arising out of advertisements which are targeted at customers in India or from advertisements which are accessed by persons using internet protocol in India. For example, let us understand with an example. Suppose there is an event which is being organized outside India, and under that event certain advertisements are placed during the intervals, and suppose those advertisements are targeted towards Indian customers, then any revenue generated out of those advertisements shall be deemed to be accruing or arising in India out of this explanation. Okay, or suppose those are not targeted towards Indian customers, but if that advertisement is being accessed by internet protocols in India, by using internet protocols in India, then any revenue which is going to be generated out of that advertisement shall be taxable in India as accruing or arising in India. Okay, now the question is how such transactions will be tracked. This will be a very difficult task. I don't know how they are going to tax such kinds of information and how they are going to collect this information, but this is an amendment which is brought in by this act. So any revenue from advertisement activities which is targeted towards Indian customers, or if it is being accessed from India by using internet protocols in India, it will be taxable in India. The second amendment explanation says कि sale of data collected from a person who resides in India or from a person who uses internet protocol address located in India. So suppose we are using certain kinds of services on internet, and that company is collecting certain kind of information from us. For example, our age, our occupation, our address, etc. Okay, if that information is sold by that company to some other company, then any income accruing or arising out of that sale transaction, that sale of data which is collected from persons in India or from persons who are accessing it through internet protocols in India, that transaction will be covered under income accruing or arising in India from activities in India. Okay, now how they are going to track this sale transaction wherein a company is selling data of customers to some other company, I don't know how they are going to track it, but this is one provision which is brought in by the amendment in Finance Act 2020. It seems impossible, but I think they will be equipped with some kind of technology which they are going to use. Okay, so second explanation deals with such kinds of transactions. It will be taxable in India. The third one is sale of goods or services using the data collected from a person who resides in India or from a person who uses internet protocol address located in India. Now, for example, suppose a company outside India has collected certain information from Indian customers or from persons who are accessing it through internet protocols from India, and based on that data which is collected, if that company undergoes sales, then that revenue which is generated out of that sale of goods or services using the data which they have collected, that income, proportionate income out of that sale transaction, will be taxable as income which is accruing or arising in India through activities in India under this explanation. Okay, so this is going to have a huge impact on the way the transactions are being taxed. They are kind of including all kinds of digital means of transactions and transactions which are dependent upon data which is collected through such kinds of internet transactions. Okay, so this is the first amendment brought in under explanation 3A under section 9. The second amendment is in clause 6 of clause 1 under section 9. Now this amendment deals with the term royalty, which is taxable in India. Now under the definition of royalty, certain activities were excluded. Under that exclusions, any income which was received as consideration for sale or distribution or exhibition of cinematographic films was excluded from the definition of royalty. Okay, now that omission has been omitted by this Finance Act 2020. The result is royalty will include all kinds of considerations which are received for sale, distribution or exhibition of cinematographic films. Okay, for example, if there is a foreign film and a person in India wants to display that film in India, if he wants to distribute and exhibit that film in India, he will be taking rights of that film to exhibit that film in India. So any consideration which he is going to pay to the person outside India will be now treated as if it is a royalty paid by that person to a person outside India, and accordingly it will be taxable in India. Now the logic behind bringing this amendment is, if we refer the previous provisions, these kinds of transactions were not included in the definition of royalty. So resultantly, it used to go under the provisions of PGBP. Okay, it was not considered as royalty, but then it would go under PGBP. Now under PGBP, in order to tax any income in India, we need to check whether there is any permanent establishment or business connection in India or not. So for those persons for whom there was no permanent establishment in India or there was no business connection in India, that income was not taxable because of the provisions existing under the PGBP head. Now by making this kind of transaction as a royalty, it will automatically be taxable, because under royalty you are not going to check whether there is permanent establishment or whether there is any business connection or not. Irrespective of business connection or permanent establishment, royalty is taxable in India as income accruing or arising in India. Okay, so that was the logic behind making this amendment. So up till here the amendments related to section 9 are covered. The next amendments are amendments which are brought in under section 12A, that is 12A and 12AA, and section 1023C. Now all these amendments are dealing with amendments for institutions which are educational institutions, religious trust, medical institutions, such kinds of institutions which were enjoying the benefit of exemption either under section 11 because of registration under section 12AA, or under section 1023C or 1046 because of registrations under those sections. Okay, now these amendments are actually again like unexpected kind of. Under the original provisions, registration under section 12AA granted to religious trusts or charitable trusts was a lifetime registration, right? But now a new section has been brought in, section 12AB, which will be effective from 1st June 2020. Now under the provisions which are brought in by Finance Act 2020, the registration to charitable trusts or religious trusts shall not be a perpetual registration, but it will be a limited registration, and you will have to renew this registration after a certain period of time. Okay, and that certain period of time is 5 years. So maximum validity for a registration either under section 12AA or under section 1023C shall be maximum for 5 years, and then after 5 years you will have to renew it continuously. Okay, this is a major amendment which is brought in under these sections. So section 12AB, the first major amendment is perpetual registration has been removed. Maximum period will be for 5 years. You have to renew your registration, and then there are certain provisions related to these registration. Let us discuss those amendments. Now we will classify the registration provisions based upon the situation of the trust. For example, if that trust has already been registered under section 12AA, what will be the provisions which will be applicable? If it is going to register itself right now, what will be the provisions? Okay, so for trusts which are already registered under section 12AA, those trusts will have to make a new application for registration under this provision, section 12AB, and it should be done within 3 months from the date on which amendment comes into force. Okay, within 3 months from the date when the amendment comes into force. Now this amendment comes into force from 1st June 2020. That means 3 months, June, July and August. The existing trusts registered under section 12AA will have to make an application by 31st August 2020 for a fresh registration under section 12AB as provided by amendment. Okay, the second amendment is with the provisions. I am reading the provisions related to section 12AB. So you have to make application within 3 months. Order related to that application which is made shall be passed within a period of 3 months from the end of the month in which it is received. Okay, so the time limit which is given to pass order against that application will be 3 months from the end of the month in which application has been received by the commissioner. The validity of this application, that is the registration, will be 5 years as discussed earlier. So existing registration will no longer be perpetual. You have to make an application for fresh registration within 3 months from the date of its coming into force. It will be valid for next 5 years, and then again you have to make a fresh application. Okay, this is for those kinds of institutions which are already registered. Okay, now let us take the next case. What if you are going to apply for fresh registration? Okay, so in that case application is to be done 1 month prior to the previous year relevant to the assessment year from which approval is sought for. Okay. For example, suppose if you want registration from financial year 2020-21, you should have made an application 1 month prior to this assessment year. Okay, 1 month prior to the previous year relevant to the assessment year. So our previous year is 2020-21, assessment year 2021-22. So 1 month prior to that, that means in the month of March, that is from 1st March to 31st March, you should have made an application in order to get registration which is relevant or which is in force from 1st April 2020. Okay, earlier years, in earlier provisions, registration would come into effect from the year in which application was made. No more provisions will be applicable, that is gone now. So you have to make well in advance this application for fresh registration 1 month prior to the previous year relevant to the assessment year from which approval is sought for. Okay, that means if I make an application in current financial year, that is current previous year 2020-21, I will get a registration which will come into force from the previous year 2021-22 only. Okay, I won't get any application, a registration which will be applicable from 2020-21 because the financial year has already started, previous year has already started. Now the order regarding the application received is to be passed within a period of 1 month from the end of the month in which the application has been received. Okay, this is very basic provision. The peculiar part in this provisions is this registration, which is if registration is granted within the period of 1 month from the receipt of application for fresh registration, that registration shall be a provisional registration valid for 3 years only. Okay, you will not get directly a registration for 5 years. Fresh registration shall be given as a provisional registration applicable for 3 years only. Now in that 3 years ka phase, you have to make one more application for a final registration. Okay, I'll read those provisions. For final registration, application is to be done within 6 months from the commencement of activities or 6 months prior to the period of expiry of provisional registration, whichever is earlier. So within 6 months from the commencement of your activities, you have to make registration for final registration, application for final registration, or 6 months prior to the expiry of your provisional registration, whichever is earlier, you have to make an application for final registration. Now that application for final registration will be processed and an order shall be passed within a period of 6 months from the end of the month in which it is received. Okay, so if you have started your activities, for example, suppose on 1st September 2020, then you have to make an application within 6 months from the date of commencement. Then once you make an application, then it will be processed and an order for final registration shall be passed within 6 months from the end of the month in which you make an application. Okay, now that final order shall make the registration for 5 years in total. Okay, so previously you had a provisional registration for 3 years. You will make an application for final registration. If an order is passed for granting final registration, additional 2 years shall be provided to your originally existing registration. That means 3 years provisional plus additional 2 years. In total, you will have an application granted, that is registration granted for 5 years. Okay, so this is in case of new registrations. New registrations are to be done. Initially, you will get a provisional registration for 3 years. You have to make application for final registration. It should be done within 6 months from commencement or 6 months prior to the date on which your provisional registration is going to expire, whichever is earlier. Okay, then it will be processed and order will be passed. It will grant you 2 more years over and above your originally existing 3 years. Okay, and the most important part is you have to make an application prior to the previous year relevant to the assessment year for which you need registration. Okay, it should be prior to 1 month, at least 1 month. That means if I make a application in current year, I will get an registration from next year only. I cannot get registration with effect from current year in the year in which I make an application. Clear? So we have seen 2 scenarios. First was for existing trusts, you have to again apply within 3 months from the provisions coming into force. That is, we have discussed, you have to make a fresh application under section 12AB by 31st August 2020 for existing trusts which are registered under section 12AA. For new registrations, we just discussed all the provisions which are applicable. Now, for renewal of the trusts which are registered under section 12AB, that is, if you have registered according to section 12AB, then we have to again go for renewal after 5 years. What are the provisions for that? Let us see. Application is to be done 6 months prior to the period of expiry of registration. Okay, so prior to your completion of 5 years, in case of new registration, prior to 6 months you have to make an application. Order shall be passed within 6 months from the end of the month in which the application for renewal of registration under section 12AB has been received, and then again the validity of next registration shall be for 5 years. That means every time you are going to get a registration which will be valid for a period of 5 years. After the 5 years period, again you will get a new registration valid for more 5 years. Okay. The original provisions remain kind of same. That is, application is to be made to either Principal Commissioner or Commissioner of Income Tax exemption under section 12AB. And if the Commissioner is not satisfied, he can reject the application or he can cancel your registration if the activities are not according to the objects which are laid under your memorandum. Of course, after giving a reasonable opportunity of being heard, he can cancel your registration. So the crux of this matter is कि perpetual registration has been removed. You will have to prove that you are doing some kinds of activities and they are going to keep a control on such kinds of trusts, that is charitable trusts or religious trusts, and every time they are going to keep a check whether it is carried on as per the objects or not, and the registration shall be renewed after every 5 years. Okay, application has to be done after every 5 years. Now, similar to the provisions as discussed, similar provisions have been introduced under section 1023C and 1046. Okay, so those institutions which are registered under section 1023C will have to follow the same regime. Same periods have been given. The provisions will be effective from 1st June 2020 only. All the provisions as discussed earlier for section 12AB are similarly applicable and similarly amended under section 1023C and 1046. Now, the next amendment that has been brought is कि suppose you are having a registration under section 12AA and you have also taken a registration under section 1023C. Earlier, you could keep both the registrations, and then during assessment, suppose the assessing officer if he would have pointed out that you are not eligible for these conditions, you are not satisfying these conditions as laid down under section 1023C, then you would opt there to section 12AA. So there was an option, standby option kept ready by certain large institutions by taking registration under both sections, that is section 12AA as well as section 1023C. But by the amendment which is brought by Finance Act 2020, they have clearly mentioned that suppose you are having 12AA registration and you take 1023C registration, your 12AA registration shall be inoperative and vice versa. So in short, 1023C and 12AB, the amended 12AB or the earlier 12AA registration, both registrations are mutually exclusive. You can either have this or that, but you cannot keep both the registrations. One of those registrations shall become inoperative. Okay, this is one major amendment which this act has brought. Now, modifications or alterations to the object clause of the trust can be made as it was available earlier, and it is to be made within 30 days from the date of alteration or modification to the object. Okay. The next amendment, which is related to trusts, is earlier we all know that under section 12AA trusts, under section 11, while computing the income, any voluntary contribution received with a specific direction that it is going to form a part of corpus shall be excluded. This was the existing provision. Similar provision has been brought in under section 1023C now, because earlier 1023C did not have this provision. Now under section 1023C, any voluntary contribution received with a specific direction that it is going to form a part of corpus shall not be computed as income. Okay, it will be treated as capital C. Now both 12AA and section 1023C are similar, are on same lines. This is the first amendment related to donations. Now the next amendment related to donations is corpus donations given to institutions under section 1023C by 12AA or 12AB trust shall not be considered as application of income. This is another amendment. Now in the earlier existing provisions, only donations which are given to charitable trusts under section 12A, registered under section 12AA, by charitable trusts registered under section 12AA, forming a part of corpus, was not eligible for application of income. Now they have added 1023 institutions also. So now if an institution which is registered under section 12AA gives a corpus donation to 1023C registered institutions, even that donation will not be considered as application of income. In the originally existing provisions, this was a lacuna kind of, कि if 12A registered institutions would give corpus donations to 1023C registered institutions, it was assumed that it was application of income. Now it will no longer be assumed as application of income. It will be excluded from the provisions as amended by Finance Act 2020. Similar provisions have been amended and brought into under section 1023C. So under section 1023C, if 1023C registered institutions give any corpus donations to 12AA registered institutions, that will not be considered as income exempt as applied. Okay, it will not be considered under application of income. Okay. So corresponding amendments are brought in under both the sections. Now, along with amendments under section 12AA, 1023C and 1046, similar amendments have been brought in under section 80G. So 80G, if an institution is registered under section 80G, the person who gives donations to such institutions can claim deduction for such donations given, right? We all know this section. If an institution is registered under section 80G, only then can the person claim benefit. Now you have to register under section 80G. After 5 years, you have to renew it. So similar amendments have been brought on similar lines. So exactly same provisions have been brought in under section 80G as seen under section 12AB. So there will be no perpetual registration under section 80G. You have to renew your registration under section 80G. The time limits of 6 months or 1 month or 3 months remain the same as discussed under section 12AB. Okay. Now along with this amendment, this was actually relevant because since you have amended section 12AB, corresponding amendments took place under section 80G also. Now something new has been brought in under section 80G, a new concept of generation and filing of certificates and statements under section 80G. Now what they have done is, earlier there was no record of persons who were claiming 80G because there was no filing of statements by such institutions who were registered under section 80G. We all know under TDS, the person who who deducts tax files a statement, and because of that statement the department can trace and record and relate the income and tax portions. Such mechanism was not available under the donations part, wherein people were claiming deductions under section 80G, but corresponding cross check was not possible because there was no statement which was filed by 80G registered institutions. Okay, now 80G provides for filing of statements which will include details like PAN of the person, name of the person, the amount of donation, and that information will be used to provide deduction under section 80G to the person who is going to claim it in his return of income. Okay, so this is one new concept brought in. So one additional work that we have to do now, we have to file such statements similar to TDS returns. Now along with this provision, the late fee portion and penalty provisions are also introduced for such statements. These late fee and penalty provisions are exactly similar to TDS late fee and penalty provisions. So a new section 234G has been introduced, which is similar to section 234E, which deals with late fee for TDS. So 234G deals with late fee for statement which is to be filed by 80G registered institutions, and along with 80G registered institutions, certain other institutions which are receiving donations, for example section 35 registered institutions which are receiving donations or contributions for scientific research, even those institutions are liable to file such statements. Now such statements are to be filed, and late fee will be under section 234G, which will be rupees 200 per day for those number of days for which the default continues. Maximum will be up to that amount which was failed to be reported under that statement. Exactly similar to existing section 234E, which deals with late fee for TDS returns. Okay, so this is one corresponding amendment. Then for penalty for non-filing of such statement, section 271K has been introduced, which provides for a penalty ranging from rupees 10,000 to rupees 1 lakhs for non-filing or default in compliance of provisions under section 80G. Okay, which deals with filing of statement and issuing of certificate to the person who gives donation under section 80G. Okay, so these all were the amendments which were related to trusts and institutions registered under section 12AA, 1023C, 1046 and section 80G. And altogether different mechanism has been brought into by this Finance Act, and these provisions are actually brought in by the Act in order to have a better control over such institutions and have a better check on the activities of such institutions, and also to provide for deductions to the persons who are involved in donations and contributions under section 35 or 80G and so on. Okay.